would like to welcome you to The Charm of It, a podcast for knitters who share my fascination with the nitty-gritty details of our craft. If you're a returning viewer, it is so nice to see you again. And if you're a new viewer, I'm really glad you found your way to my little corner of the internet. I record 2 different kinds of episodes. The project snapshots are only works in progress. And then there are the other ones, like this week's, where I talk about finished objects and then a variety of knitting-related segments. So I have 3 finished objects to share with you this week, in addition to reading from a couple books that have had fiber references. I will be discussing how I chose my color palette in knitting and my wardrobe in general. I don't know if you can see Moth. She's curled up. There she is. She's my cat. Anyway, so that'll be the topic, and that is kind of answering a question or using the question as a springboard, because it's the kind of topic I love to discuss, from the wonderful Kelly the Careless Cat on Instagram and Ravelry. And I will be reviewing Quince & Company Owl for my yarn review. So there won't be any Knits in the Wild segment this week. I'm really glad that you guys enjoy the new format, but I think I'm going to have to do it once a month because I just don't have enough photos yet. I have had a kind of rough couple weeks health-wise, so I haven't been taking as many photos, even though I still wear my hand knits. And sorry that I am a day late. I usually record on Thursday afternoons, but Moth had her annual wellness checkup at the vet. She's coming home with me for Christmas this year because the friends who always pet sit for me have adopted a new dog who does not get along well with cats, which I did not know when I bought my plane ticket, so I'm going to be gone for quite a while. And I just can't afford to pay a pet sitter to come stay in my apartment with Moth, so she will be flying too. So the vet gave her some anti-nausea and anti-anxiety meds for the day because she doesn't like being in cars or buses. So hopefully, with the medicine's help, we'll all get to Texas in one piece and with our sanity intact. Let's get back to the knitting, and I'm going to do finished objects first. Even though this is the one I'm most excited about, I'm going to talk about it last because I always talk a lot about sweaters, so I don't want to have lost all of my energy and then get to the other 2 projects. So first up is my mom's rose trellis scarf, which is knit using Rosemary Hill's Waves of Grain, a free pattern on Knitty. And it's knit with Anzula Breeze, which is a lace weight yarn linen silk blend in the mulberry colorway. My mom picked this out when I was visiting last Christmas at the local yarn store down there. And I'm really pleased with how it came out. So my mom prefers to only wrap scarves around her neck once. So she originally told me that she wanted the ends to end like up here-ish. So I FaceTimed her when I said this, when I had the second half to that length, so that she could see what it looked like on me. And she decided that actually she would like it to be more around her waist to high hip area when it was wrapped once. So I made it a little bit longer, which you cannot see at all. But this is the length that she wants, and she loves it already on FaceTime. I'm sure she'll love it even more in person because it's so soft and drapey. So I'm really pleased with how this turned out. And it was nice to knit. I really like knitting scarves in this way, where you knit the first half and then you knit the second half, because I don't have to worry about running out of yarn. And just when I'm getting bored doing the plain body repeat, I'm done and I get to start the second end. So it's more motivating for me. And I also have found that it's pretty important for me that the main part of the scarf is very simple so that I can do it while reading, because scarves are not that inherently interesting to me. And so if it were all over patterned, I think there's no way that I could do it for long enough to get a nice scarf. But I have not blocked this yet. I knit it to the size and texture that I wanted it, because I don't think that linen and silk are going to want a hard block. Sorry, I think I snagged a thread there. But I am going to go ahead and block just the ends, I think. I'm going to get them wet and then pin them out, just because these triple D creases tend to pucker a bit, and that goes away with blocking. But I'm not even going to mess with the main body of the scarf, because I tend to overstretch scarves even when I don't mean to, and I don't want that to happen here. I recorded a video showing grafting, because you have to graft the 2 ends together. So if you are interested in that, it is there. Since I'm up, here's a close-up of the blocked lace on my cardigan. We have one more finished object to talk about before we get to the sweater. It's little though. So I made a Christmas ornament. I have not knit a Christmas bauble before. I have made Christmas ornaments, but I've made them out of felt and sewn and embroidered them. And I thought it would be really fun to knit some ornaments this year because I had such a good time knitting pumpkins for Halloween and then my crow. So I did a color work one with reindeer, yay! And the yarn is Cascade 220 in Burgundy and Quince & Company Owl in Elf. So I did it in worsted weight, and I kind of used a mashup of patterns. I used General Hogbuffer's Balls Up pattern for the general shape, but I had to change it to a bigger gauge because of worsted weight. Wait, no, I'm fibbing. I looked at that pattern, but I didn't use it. I used a Patton's pattern for DK balls. So I used that pattern for the decorative top and bottom and the general shaping. I think I just omitted the final increase round since I was knitting worsted weight. And then for the reindeer in the middle, I used one of the patterns from the free Advent mitten calendar, which I love this. I want a little garland of tiny mittens all going across in color work Christmas festive themes. However, I do not want to knit 24 tiny mittens. If there was a way to knit them flat, I would do that, but I just know that not only do I not have it in me to knit 24 tiny mittens in the round, but I definitely do not have it in me to knit 24 tiny thumbs in the round. So I just admire that pattern from afar, but I know that it would bring me no joy to knit. Maybe I can bring myself to knit like one or two and just not put numbers on them. Or if anyone wants to trade, that would be amazing. If you enjoy knitting tiny mittens and you want to knit me an advent calendar, I will knit you whatever you want, equivalent. So message me if you are curious about that. I don't expect anyone to take me up on that offer because I can't imagine anyone enjoys knitting tiny thumbs, but who knows. Anyway, so Christmas baubles. It turns out it's much more difficult to get a round bauble than it is to get a round pumpkin. And I think that's because, first of all, the pumpkins I knit were a bit smaller than this. And second of all, when you knit the pumpkin, you knit it as a ball, but then you use your yarn to make the pumpkin veins. And so, it gets nice and squished. So I was a little unhappy with my inability to get it into a sphere when stuffing it. And I just used the recycled poly fiber fill that I've used every time I've knit softies. So I asked Instagram what other people did. Several people use plastic ornaments inside, which makes perfect sense. However, to me, the point of knitting an ornament is so that I'm not buying ornaments. So that just seems it's just not my goal when I'm knitting these. And so I am going to have to do some thinking and experimenting. This also turned out a little bigger than I wanted, so I think in future I'll be knitting. I've got a whole collection of red and naturally white, off-white, gray yarn. I've stuck them all in one basket so that whenever I feel like knitting a Christmas ornament, I can just pick yarn from there. So I've got it in all weight, so I'm going to try knitting it in a smaller yarn, smaller gauge, so that they end up a little smaller, and see if that makes them easier to stuff too. It's possible that I just didn't fill this full enough with fiber fill because I'm just not used to, I was almost out of fiber fill, and so I might have been being a bit too frugal with it. And then I might also try a few different patterns to see if the way that the increases and decreases done form a better sphere. But that aside, I think it's really cute. And my Christmas decorations tend to be rustic and woodland themed, which I'm sure surprises no one who has been watching this podcast or follows my Instagram feed. Those are two of my favorite things. I like to pretend that I actually live in a cottage in the woods. So this will definitely fit right in. I would like to make a few as gifts as well, so that's really where I'm going to be more fussy about the spherical. Someone suggested using pantyhose and stuffing the filling in them to make balls and then putting that inside, which would work if I had any pantyhose. I think I might have a pair of tights that has too many holes to be wearable, so if I do, I will wash them and then see how that goes. But I definitely don't own pantyhose because I go bare-legged until it's too cold. But yeah, so expect a few more Christmas decorations over the coming weeks. I will admit it was not as much fun as the pumpkins. I think because the pumpkins I could just, like, they were just in the round in one solid color, so I just knit them while I was reading. And then I got to do the little threading thing, and that was really fun. But I would like to have a few around. And stranded color work is always enjoyable for me. Okay, so my Marzipan cardigan. This is my last finished object, and I love this so much. It's knit out of Elsa Wool Cormo in the Woolen Spun Lace Weight Silver Gray, aka 10% colorway. Her website gives you lots of options. It's like a chart, so. And the buttons are shell buttons that I bought on Etsy a while ago when I was ordering buttons for a different sweater, so I just added some shell buttons to my cart. And I love the look of shell buttons. Uh-oh, I just snagged it on a stitch. Anyway, I love the look of shell buttons, and I keep trying to put them on other sweaters, and they never really worked. A lot of times they were too bright. So I was really excited to finally have a sweater where I think the shell buttons really enhance it and kind of add to this kind of off-white, very natural feel. If you're wondering, this poof is from my dress strap. It is not the sweater, so thought I would take it off for a minute so that I can show you the back. Here is the back. I love how this turned out. So I already told you the yarn. I knit it at a gauge of 7.5 stitches to the inch because it's a heavy lace weight. It's 350 yards to 2 ounces, which is a little more than 50 grams. And I tend to knit woolen spun yarn one size up because it just seems to behave best. So here's the back. I love how those triangles turned out. There's one front, and then sleeves. And the pattern I used is Pointel by Cookie A, which is a sock pattern that is knit on the bias, and so I adapted it to work for a cardigan because I knit it as socks, and I loved it so much that I really wanted it to be a cardigan as well. And all the bands are 1x1 twisted ribbing, which is my favorite, with either the tubular cast on in the case of the sleeves and the waistband, or the invisible 1x1 sewn bind off in the case of the neckband and the button bands. And I just blocked it. I just pulled it off the blocking. I use a mesh thing, so the blocking mesh today. So this is my first wearing post blocking. If you want to see a funny series of pictures, I put them on Instagram because I had everything done on the sweater except for the second sleeve seamed in, so I took some funny pictures. Okay, and here is how that lace looks on the sleeve. Here is the side seams. I'm so pleased with how these chevrons ended up coming together. And then here's the sleeve with the lace starting right around my elbow. Here's my elbow for reference. I thought it would sit like this, but apparently I don't quite understand sleeve construction because the top of the sleeve cap, this all lines up together, so I don't know. Don't know why I assumed the top of my shoulder was level with the back of my elbow. Okay, I'm going to go sit down now and stop being weird. So, what was I going to say? I've talked a lot about the design or construction process and the adaptation process in previous episodes, so I don't want to rehash that too much in case you find it boring. But it was really interesting having to adapt charts for on the bias in order to knit them flat for the fronts and the back. And because this, there's diagonal lines going in all kinds of directions, and so I'm going to write up the notes of what I did and put them on the project page. A few people have expressed the desire that I would write the pattern, but even if I wanted to, which I don't, I couldn't because Pointel is a paid-for pattern, and I used her charts throughout. So I'm going to share my notes, and that way if you buy the sock pattern and you happen to be my size, you'll be able to use the notes as is. I think I can write them in such a way where it won't give away any of the pattern. You know, it won't be copyright infringement. I'm just going to be telling you, like, what row did I do this on. And then if you're not my size, you'll have to adapt further. But that is how I'm going to handle that. Because I kept pretty thorough notes as I was going so that I could match. Except for the back. I didn't write anything about the back. Anyway, I am really glad that I chose to do lace on the sleeves as well as on the front and back, because I think it's just really nice to have that aesthetically. I think it would have been too much to have all the spiral lace. However, it's interesting because I started the lace on the sleeves at the same point that I started it on the body. However, the body, the sleeves, the lace was growing at a rate of 1 stitch every other row. But on the sleeves, because they were knit in the round the way the socks were, the lace grew at a rate of 2 stitches every other row. So that's why the lace ends up kind of taking over, like all the diagonal lines are gone, sooner on the sleeve than on the body of the cardigan. So that's why the diagonal lines don't match up, even though I started the lace at the same distance from the underarm. But that's okay. It doesn't bother me too much. It's just something that I had not taken into account when I was choosing. So something to think about if you are going to be knitting a sweater like that. I knit myself extra long sleeves, and I really love it. It has taken me a long time to figure out what length sleeves I like. Oh, I forgot to tell you how much yarn this took. It took 3 skeins, so 6 ounces, and for the very last 2 rows of this buttonhole band, which is the last thing I knit, I had to start to unravel my swatch. I did 2 swatches, but neither of them were terribly large. So I was glad I had a 4th skein for backup, so I wasn't nervous and playing yarn chicken, but that's how much yarn it took me. And so back to sleeves. I really like having long sleeves. I have quite short arms compared to the average woman that the fashion industry bases their designs on. So I have always had most of the tops that I buy store-bought, this is where the sleeves hit, and it's kind of what I'm used to. So when I first started knitting sweaters for myself, I knit the sleeve to my arm length, which put it right about here, and I was just constantly trying to tug it down. Plus, I learned the hard way that if you have a sleeve that sits like this when your arm is straight, once you bend your arm, it rides up. This one isn't going to show that because the sleeves are long enough. And then the other thing is, I have found that I prefer quite a slim sleeve. I was really experimenting with sleeves this year, and when I knit my Sugar Plum cardigan, the purple one, back in February maybe, I knit a wider sleeve, thinking that maybe that was my issue with sleeves, since, as I was saying, I felt like I had not found the perfect sleeve yet. But I actually don't like that. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to unseam those sleeves and reknit them slimmer at some point. Just because, and I also didn't use a traditional ribbing. I used fisherman's rib or something. Broken seed stitch rib. Anyway, something that doesn't have the same elasticity, so it bags out. So it lets the cold air up my arm, and then, I don't know, the sleeve just doesn't behave well. And I think that it looks a little too big on my bicep, that one. So I definitely prefer a slimmer fitting sleeve. I tend to wear my cardigans over sleeveless dresses and tops anyway, but I think I could layer a long sleeve top under this if I needed to. Like, it's not skin tight. There's ease there, just not a ton of ease. And then I also think that I have nailed my arm side preference, which is 7.5 inches. Also the Sugar Plum cardigan, I did 8 inches. I wanted to be able to layer that cardigan over anything, so that's why I added a bit more space to those areas. And it is easier to pull that on over a long sleeve t-shirt, but in reality I don't really wear my cardigans over long sleeve t-shirts, so I don't need them to be that kind of layer. So definitely 7.5-inch arm side is the one for me, and I just think that that makes for a very neat, clean finish, but I've still got enough space that I could layer, and it's not like I'm being pinched, because that would be no fun. Huh, Thistle? I know. And then, yeah, I like a crew neck. I put a little more vertical ease in the body as well, which I tried for the first time in the Country Mouse cardigan that I knit in September, and I really like that. So I'm just really happy. I feel like I've been knitting sweaters for, what, 2 years now? I think. Like 2 solid years. I knit my first sweater, I think. I started it 3 years ago, but it took me almost all year to knit. And I've always known the basic shape I wanted, which was cropped and fitted, but I did not know the particulars, and I think the only way to find that out is to do a little bit of experimenting. So I am just absolutely delighted with this sweater. It's comfortable to wear. It has a nice, neat, like lightweight fabric that's warm but not too warm. This is the first time I've tried a lace wool sweater versus linen. I've knit several linen lace sweaters, and I wasn't really sure, but especially this isn't a very open lace, and I think it's going to work really great. I'll probably have the sleeves pushed up a lot. I like to have that option, just because as it warms up or whatever, and I like being able to wear it open as well as closed, but I am just completely delighted with this, and I feel like I learned a lot about how lace works and how bias fabric works and all that kind of stuff. I guess I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Hopefully that doesn't sound cocky, and it's going to go with everything in my closet, so I'm going to get so much wear out of it. I also just wanted to say thank you to the person who gave me the gift card for my birthday that made this sweater possible. I am going to treasure it for years, and knitting it was a wonderful process, so thank you so much. I didn't ask if I could name you, so I won't, but hopefully you're watching. And yeah, I feel like those are really all the details. I think I've covered all the other technical details. Either they'll be on the project page or they're in previous episodes. Let's see, the buttons. I do both buttons and buttonholes on the 1/3 line instead of the half line to try to make sure that the bands sit more neatly. I wasn't really sure how to block this because I've never knit a lace wool sweater before, and the linen ones I just machine wash and dry. So I might have stretched it a little bit too much, but it still sits on my shoulders, so I think it's good. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about. So in addition to slimmer sleeves and a 7.5-inch arm side, when I was knitting these sleeve caps, I ended up with, I bound off 14 stitches, and my gauge was 7.5 stitches to the inch, so that's a little under 2 inches, which is slimmer than, it's much slimmer than Ann Budd's Handy Book of Patterns suggests. Hers suggests, I think, 22 stitches when you're knitting 7 stitches to the inch. And it's even a bit slimmer than with the custom fit pattern that I used for my Phryne jumper, which is knit at a similar gauge. That one called for 16 stitches, so not a big difference, but I love how this sleeve cap fits. And it's funny, like I didn't intentionally decrease to 14 stitches, I just had a really difficult time getting the length right on this cap, and so that's just where I ended up. But yeah, I really love it. So that's another thing that I'm going to keep in mind for future knitting. I'm really glad that I actually wrote all of my sleeve cap things down so that hopefully I can mimic that in future. I recorded a video of how I match or seam the sides of this sweater, just because I know a lot of people don't like seaming or have never seamed and think it's really difficult, so I thought I would just show it because I think it's fun and simple side seams. I did record a video for seaming in the second sleeve, however, I'm still in the process of trying to edit it in a way that makes sense and is informative and is not 40 minutes long, because I filmed the entire seaming, and that's how long it takes me to seam in a sleeve cap. I had gotten halfway through the editing when iMovie crashed and I lost it all, which has never happened to me before. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get that. I was not feeling very well on the day I recorded it, so it's a bit disjointed anyway. But I will try my best. And the funny part is, so I'd already seamed in one sleeve, and it went perfectly well. So then I waited until a brighter day to seam in the second one so that I would have light to record. And I started with the back of the second sleeve, because I always start with the backs, because that way if anything goes wrong, it's on the back, not the front, and I'll know. So I tend to do a better job on the fronts. So I start up here, and then I go down the back, and then I go down the front. And I was trying to narrate while I was seaming, and I kept losing count. And I had more rows in the body than the sleeve cap, so I needed to be taking more stitches in here than here when I was seaming, and I didn't do it enough. So I got down to here, and there was like half an inch, which is what, 1 centimeter, of extra fabric. And so suddenly I just get very quiet, and I stopped trying to narrate, but I did fix it, and I think it looks fine. Even before blocking, when I tried it on, you couldn't really tell, so I decided not to redo it and to just leave it fudged. So if I do manage to get it into a workable tutorial, then you will see an example of how to fudge your seams when it's gone wrong. Oh. Maybe I should just go back and record narration now. I couldn't record it, I couldn't narrate at the time because I was too busy trying to figure out how to fix it without having to pull all the way back. But yeah. I definitely would knit more wool lace wool sweaters in the future after this one. And it just has really, I feel like I'm at the next level now of sweater knitting, and that's a really nice place to be. So hopefully that doesn't sound too cocky. I don't feel cocky, I just feel really happy and excited. And this was the last piece of my first owl for the Harry Potter House Cup group over on Ravelry. So I have not turned it in yet because I wanted to get photos once it was blocked, but once I turn it in, I will have my Charms owl, which is really exciting. Once you have all 12 owls, you're an owl mistress. That will take at least four years, because there are 3 terms a year, and you can only do 1 owl a term. But I'm already thinking that I really want to be an owl mistress. And I love this color so much. I have a lace hat and then mittens in this exact same color yarn in the worsted weight, and I definitely plan to wear them all together. And then the Pointel socks that I knit are in a very similar color. They're out of Quince & Company Finch, not Elsa wool, but it's also an undyed pale sheep, grayish, taupey thing. So lots of matchy-matchiness going on with this. And since I have that 4th skein left over, I think I might eventually do a colorwork sweater out of all the different sheep colors of Elsa wool. Wouldn't that be lovely? Okay, I have rambled on long enough about finished objects. I'm going to read to you, and then we will get into a discussion of how to choose knitting color palettes. Did I prepare for this? No, of course not. So the first one I'm going to read to you is from Green Glass House by Kate Milford, which is a children's book. It's written in a modern, it's written by a modern author. However, it's definitely in that tradition of kind of classic children's literature, kind of like Five Children and It, those kinds of things, except without all the sexism and racism. So I highly recommend it. It was magical and charming, and I think it would be good for pretty much all age groups. There's not, well, there is death in it, so I guess depending on how your child feels about that. My niece is really sensitive to that. She won't even walk into a cemetery, like, you know, historic cemeteries and that kind of stuff. But it's not, I think it's very charming. And as a child, I would have loved it, because some of my favorite books were like The Children of Green Know, which all have ghosts in them, so obviously the children had to die in order to become ghosts. But, okay, I'm trying to find the right one. Here we go. So, the book is set in an inn in a very remote area of a kind of fictional country that feels a bit like Cornwall, but then also a bit like North America. And it's about a little, and so usually over Christmas, the inn doesn't have any guests, and it's just the little boy with his parents. But this Christmas, all these odd people have shown up. And that's what the book is about, because all these guests seem to have mysterious agendas, and things are going missing, and the little boy and his new friend are trying to solve it. So throughout the book, one of the guests is an older woman who has a knitting bag with knitting inside it. So she's knitting, and the knitting bag plays a bit of a role in the story, so I thought that was really nice. And then at the end, Milo is the name of the little boy, by the way. She fixed him with a stern look, then it crumbled away, and she smiled as she held out a flat box wrapped in red striped paper. "Merry Christmas, dear." "For me? Thank you." He tore off the paper and opened the box. Inside were a scarf and a pair of mittens, the dark green with white snowflakes dotting them here and there. "Are these what you were knitting all this time?" "Yes, but I confess I didn't realize they were for you until today." She patted his shoulder. "You were very good to all of us, Milo, and we certainly didn't give you any particular reason to be. Whoever said this house is full of treasures is right, and I think you're the biggest treasure of all." So, I just thought that that was really a nice little moment. So that's the first one. The second one is from the book that I'm currently running a read-along for, and that is Under the Pendulum Sun by Jeanette. I hope I said that right. Let me know. Celeste. Celeste is another knitting podcaster, and she is from Hong Kong, and so, as is this author, and so her last name is spelled NG, so I messaged her on Instagram to ask how to pronounce it, and she was so kind. She even sent me a video, and she said it's pronounced like but with your lips open. So, Jeanette, maybe? Apparently, that's the Cantonese pronunciation of the same character that in Mandarin is pronounced woo, which I've read various characters whose names are woo, so I thought that was really interesting. Okay, so anyway, Under the Pendulum Sun is also a fantasy novel. I don't know. I read books that aren't fantasy novels, but it seems like the fantasy novels seem to bring up fiber more. I'm not sure why. And let's see. Okay. So Kathy is the heroine, and the idea in this book is it's a Victorian historical novel, except in this version of Victorian England, Fairyland is a real place, and you can go there. So it's a little bit like Neil Gaiman's Stardust or Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, in that kind of idea, although the writing style is, well, the Fairyland is, I don't know, it's more Susanna Clarke than Neil Gaiman, if you've read both of those books. Anyway, and so Kathy, her brother went to be a missionary in Fairyland a couple years ago, and no one has heard from him, so she has traveled to Fairyland to try to find him. And when she arrives, she's met by a Miss Davenport, who introduces her and keeps her company at this castle while they're waiting for her brother. Okay. Miss Davenport appeared each day to keep me company. For the first few days, I politely indulged her desire to sit in the solar and knit, making conversation about the idiosyncrasies of her gauge and teaching her how to turn a heel on a sock. "It is good to make things with one's own hands sometimes," she had said. "Other methods simply don't have the same tactile satisfaction." The yarn she had brought was ethereally light and frothed around the needles as I wound it round and round. Every clicking stitch I made was a step back to Yorkshire and the confinement of my previous positions. I remembered sitting with Miss Louisa March when I was her companion, and after, for all my stated title of governess, I spent as much time darning socks as educating young minds. So, the fiber arts actually come up quite frequently in this novel, so I just picked the first passage, and I would recommend this book if you enjoy ornate writing and kind of very involved stories where the plot is very much about internal emotions and intellectual dilemmas and philosophy and theology and that kind of thing. So which I love. But I had not read her before, so I wasn't really sure what to expect, and that is really how I would summarize it. It's kind of gothic novel meets existential religious theology crisis. And I mean that in the best way. I have found it it's been a good read. And if you would like to join the read along, just let me know over on Instagram. We've been mainly doing it in a private message, just a big group chat. So it's really easy for me to just add your username to the group chat. We're all reading at our own pace, so no pressure. And yeah, so once again, that is from Under the Pendulum Sun by Jeanette I wish if I could have like one, well, I don't know about that, but I think if I had a superpower right now, I'd want it to be being able to read and write and understand all the languages of the world. I think that would be wonderful. Anyway, the final one is actually from a nonfiction book, and it's on my phone, and I just realized that I don't have my phone, so give me a minute. I am actually listening to this book on audio, but I was so struck by this passage that I'm going to read you that once I was listening to it while I was walking Thistle, and once I got home, I looked it up on the internet and screenshotted it so that I could read it to you. So the book is The Secret History of the Mongol Queens, How the Daughters of Genghis Khan Rescued His Empire, I think, by John Weatherford. And it started out very strong, but I'm now on part 6 of 9, and I am no longer very engrossed in it. I think the problem is that he didn't have enough source material to really make a book length about this, so instead he's talking a lot about Mongol men as well as women. And so, but the final book that I have to read to you from, as I said, is nonfiction, and it is The Secret History of the Mongol Queens by Jack Weatherford. And it's basically about the daughters and daughters-in-law of Genghis Khan. That's how it starts out, as well as Genghis Khan's wife and the lives of Mongolian women in general during the Genghis Khan time period. So I loved that bit. And it's a 9-part audiobook. I'm listening to it on audio. And that bit occupied, I think, almost 2 parts. But then there just isn't enough source material for him to have stretched that period of history out any longer. So the rest of it has been about the generations after that, when basically the empire fell apart and a lot of men did terrible things and a lot of women started to lose the power and rights that they had under Genghis Khan. So I am not enjoying it nearly as much as I was when I started, and I don't know if I'd recommend it or not. There's a trigger warning that you need. I think it's towards the end of part 2. I was walking Thistle on the bedtime walk, and all of a sudden there was just this absolutely horrendous thing being recounted. And so I had to stay up a couple more hours so that I wouldn't have nightmares. So, however, there's a lot of really interesting things, especially at the beginning. So I'm not sorry that I've read it, but I have just about finished, or maybe I'm somewhere around part 6 of 9, and I haven't decided yet if I'm going to finish it or not. I definitely haven't been listening to it. Like, I've switched to podcasts, basically, for my audio listening, and then I make myself listen to it for a while longer. So at that point, it's probably better to abandon it. However, as I said, I really liked the beginning, because a lot of it was on the social history, which is what I'm really interested in. How do people live day to day? So, he's describing kind of how marriages worked as far as gender stuff went. And so this is about the Mongols under Genghis Khan, well, and throughout history, they've been nomadic. So their homes were made out of felt, and we in English tend to call them yurts, but in the book he calls them gers because that's more like what the Mongols call them. So that's what is being discussed right now. In the ger, the wife ruled even if her husband happened to be a Khan. Her first felt home came from her husband's family, but through the years she would gradually add to it by unrolling the insulating blankets, called the mother felt, and pounding in new wool to make a series of fresh coverings, called the daughter felts. In this way, her hands, her perspiration, and her soul became a part of the felt, and the gair became more and more hers. Eventually, her sheets of daughter felt would help to make new gairs for her daughters-in-law. In this way, from generation to generation, the walls of each generation would be made from all the women who had married into the family through all the generations. I loved that. Hopefully you did too. Okay, so now let's get into the topic. There's really two sides to this topic. What Kelly was asking about was, how did I decide which colors were most flattering to me? And then I think there's also the more general topic of, how do you choose a color palette for your knitting? And I'm going to be talking about the seasonal color system, and the one that I used has 12 seasons. And the blog that I found most useful is called 12 Blueprints. And I find the color discussion useful. However, she also does things like talk about the personalities of the different coloring, and I think that's nonsense. So, I just want to say that before I provide the links to this blog, and you guys think that I think that, you know, if you have red hair and brown eyes, that means you have XYZ personality. I don't think that. And actually, this seasonal color system is not based on hair and eye color, which is also important to me because that's incredibly racist. The vast majority of people on this planet have brown hair or black hair and brown eyes. So I really don't like the idea that everyone who had that eye and hair combination should wear the same colors. That's absurd. And so this system is based on what different colors do to your skin, basically. You hold up colors and you see whether they make your skin look better or worse. And you can go to an analyst and they have all these drapes. And that's the way to officially find out your season. But that's not what I did because I didn't want to spend $300 doing that. And I found it pretty easy to figure out what colors flattered my skin because so many colors do not flatter my skin. My sister, on the other hand, her skin looks beautiful in all kinds of different colors. So whether this is easy for you or not is going to depend a little bit on your skin tone, or how your skin reacts, how sensitive your skin is to different colors, I suppose I should say. And the other big caveat that I wanted to mention is, I don't think you have to wear colors just because they flatter you. If you have colors that you love and those are the ones that you feel happiest wearing, then wear them. I remember reading a sewing blog years ago, and she wrote this post, and what really stuck with me was she wrote, "Pretty is not the rent you pay for being a woman." And I think that is just wonderful. So you have absolutely no obligation to be your prettiest or most conventionally attractive, or, you know, all these different ideas about color flattery and figure flattery. You don't have to do them. It's just if you're interested in them. Personally, I found that finding my most flattering colors really helped me embrace my natural hair color, which is not a shade you see on actresses in Hollywood. And it helped my self-esteem. But, like, it was part of the process, this journey I went on in my 20s to improve my self-esteem. But I certainly don't think that you should only wear colors that flatter you if you're happier in other colors. However, even if you're not interested in finding your most flattering colors, I do think that this 12 color season thing can be a good idea, because if you prefer one season and you only work with colors within that season, they all go together. It makes it really easy to put together outfits when you knit and buy clothes that are all in one color family, because they just all coordinate. So I think that there are two good reasons that you might be interested in this. So within this 12 color seasons, basically you have three important ways to categorize each color. Is it light or dark? Is it muted or saturated? And is it warm or cool? And then the 12 seasons each have a different combination of those. And so all their colors will have certain characteristics in common. And that's why I think it's very easy to mix and match them. So I personally fall into the soft summer camp, and that means that I look best in muted, cool colors. From light to dark, really. But there's also, for instance, I think my mom is a light spring, and so that means she looks good in lighter, warmer colors. So it seems like even though there's 3 characteristics, there tend to be 2 most important labels for each season. And then on this blog, she talks about how there will be 1 characteristic that matters the most to your coloring. So in my case, the most important characteristic is that a color be muted. I'm really easily overwhelmed by colors. And in order to talk about these with visual examples, I grabbed a few items. Obviously, most of what I have are going to be colors that flatter me, but I did find some that don't. So for instance, here are 3 purples. Okay. And so obviously this one is darker, right? And this one is light, and this one is somewhere in the middle. So that's where they are on that spectrum. Then there is the saturated spectrum. And saturated versus muted. So what that means is the closer a color is to gray, the more muted it is. So in that case, this color is clearly more saturated because it's just more purple. I guess I should say bright to muted. I'm not sure. And then, what's the final one? Oh, warm to cool. So this is also pretty cool. It's kind of an icy pastel, but my mom will still look good in it. This is for her, if you're wondering. And then these 2, they're cool, but they're not icy cool, so they're warmer. And that, I don't look good in icy colors. So I'll just demonstrate what happens to my skin. So here is a purple that flatters me. And you can see that even when it's kind of wrapped around my face, your eye is still going to my eyes. It's not going to the color. Okay, now, and I'm assuming that this is true on camera as well, but it's definitely true in the mirror. If I close my eyes and I reopen them, my eyes go to the color. They don't go to my face. So that, for me, is how I tell whether a color is too muted, or sorry, not too muted, there's no such thing for me, too bright for me. And this isn't what you would think of as like a bright in the same way that this is bright, but it's not muted enough for me. So that is honestly how I figured out what colors flattered me or not, is I wrapped them around my head and my face, and I would close my eyes and open them. And that tells me, it was really apparent to me that my coloring is overwhelmed by bright colors quickly. So that got me to muted. So then I just had to decide between warm and cool, because the 2 muted seasons are soft summer and soft autumn. And I found this is an undyed sheep wool, and it's quite a yellow sheep wool, so this is the closest I could get to yellow, other than that fluorescent yellow that I just showed you. And hopefully you can see that this is not as flattering to my skin tone. I wish I had like a really warm color to show you. The other one would be, but that's like a fluorescent orange. So one thing that's interesting to me is how colors can be cool and they can look muted, but then they're still too bright for me. So here are 2 greens, and then here is more of an aqua green, so this color would flatter my mom. Maybe she's a light summer. No, this, anyway, okay, so we're looking at broad strokes right now. So once again, kind of like with the purples, you can see that this one is just a brighter, clearer color than both of these. And then this one is still more clear than this one. This one is the most muted. And when I put this one on, once again, it's starting to overwhelm me, right? Like your eye is going to the yarn color, not to my coloring. Not to my eyes, sorry. But when I put this one on, it's the yarn, there we go. When I put this one on, Oh, this is going to go down in the record books for a special podcast. You're still looking at my eyes. You're not noticing the color first versus that. Okay. If you are trying this test and none of the colors overwhelm you, then you probably fit into one of the bright seasons. So that means that bright colors will flatter you most, if you're interested in that. Once again, wear whatever colors make you happiest. This is just Kelly asked, so I thought it would be nicest to do it on video because you can really see, even though they're both absolutely beautiful colors. And then, even with blues, I have to be careful. And, you know, I have fair hair. That's what I've decided to call it. It's like dark blonde, light brown. It's that sandy color that has so many meanings attached to it that I refuse to say. Anyway, and then I have blue-green eyes. So you would think that blue would be a slam dunk for me, but I still have to be careful. Oh, I have to start a new segment. So I was saying I still have to be careful because I am so easily overwhelmed by when colors have quite a bit of pigment. So these are two blue hats that I've knit. And they're quite similar as far as their shade goes. So they're quite similar on the dark to light spectrum. And they're pretty similar as far as warmth to cool goes. But this one is more muted and it flatters me more. It's also a cloche, which is a bit trickier to put on, especially when you can't see. But so here's this one. And here's this one. And this is right on the edge of too saturated for me. And I use this to knit myself a hat, obviously, since I'm wearing it. But I'm thinking about giving this hat to my sister because she looks better in colors like this. She can wear more saturated colors than I can because I really don't wear this one as much because that one works better with my coloring. And I'm going to be knitting a cowl out of this yarn, and these are both Quince & Company blues, but hopefully you can see that difference. It's really how close to gray it is, and these blues are much more flattering to me because once again my coloring is just easily overwhelmed, which is fine. Before I started reading about this, I really had no idea what colors looked good on me. I enjoyed color, and I enjoyed putting color combinations together, but I had a full rainbow of all kinds of different colors in my wardrobe. So it's not like everything worked together. I would just make outfits together. And then, since learning this, which was, gosh, maybe, I don't know, years ago, because I'm 31 now. So it's really funny. I've come to really love muted colors the most, even though that's not where I started. I started loving all colors equally. And so not only do I dress in muted colors, but I also decorate in muted colors, although I tend to use warmer colors when I decorate than I can necessarily wear because I enjoy them all. So it's nice to be able to look at the ones that I can't wear. I wish I had examples of warm muted colors more to show you so that you could see how I decided between the two, but I really just can't find many examples. So I shot, and finally, I thought I would show you that not all grays are created equal. So this one, even though it's cool and it seems like it would work, but it's a little too icy again. So it just doesn't blend with my natural coloring as much as the more sheepy light gray does. So buying online can be tricky. That's why I tend to buy color cards. This is also Quint's turn. And I bought this at the same time that I bought this blue, and it was before I ordered the color cards. So whenever color cards are available, I get them now because it can be so difficult when you're looking online to tell what characteristics a color has. If I don't have color cards, then I will look at every single project that's been knit in that colorway on Ravelry, and because I was interested in photography before I was interested in knitting, I can kind of see through the weird white balance that a lot of people use, or I'll even put it in my editing software and like correct the white balance to try to get a sense of it. And then I'm also big into over dyeing it to make it more muted if it turns out to be too clear a color for me. I guess you can't go in reverse though if bright colors suit you best. Whew. Okay, so that was a quick demonstration of how I figured out what colors are most flattering to me. And I will include a few of the most useful posts from that blog. There's a lot of information, but the way the blog is set up makes it really difficult to navigate, unfortunately. So that's how I'm going to include some direct links, because she has posts on like what are some absolutely wonderful colors for each season, what are some colors that look really bad on each season. So it can just kind of help you get ideas if you're wanting to narrow down palettes for flattery. However, as I said, you could also just pick your favorite palette. I'm going to include links to my favorite Pinterest boards that use this seasonal color analysis. And then as long as you work within that palette, then everything's going to mix and match. Now I thought I would talk a little bit about choosing a color palette in order to build your wardrobe and make it as versatile as possible. As I said, I really think that narrowing colors down into one of these seasonal palettes makes it quite easy to mix and match, because there's an underlying similarity to all the colors, and so you don't have to worry as much about things clashing. So, for example, hang on. Yeah. Okay. These are all random things that I need to put away from laundry, but these are all from my color palette, right? And they all really go together, even though this is a teal and this is a pink. These two are neutrals, but then if I were to try to add this, which is from my mom's palette, to them, that just doesn't look as cohesive. So by making sure that all my colors are soft and muted, and sorry, that was redundant, muted and cool, it means that I don't have to narrow things down any further. I can wear pinks and blue-greens and blues and reds and greens. I mean, I have a whole variety of colors open to me. It's just I'm only going to pick certain types from each color wheel, and then I do tend to avoid yellow and orange. And so I see, sometimes it seems like there's this drive amongst the idea of minimal wardrobes and curating your closet that you need to only wear neutrals because then they all mix and match. But that doesn't make sense to me, and it never has, because you don't wear all of your clothes at the same time, right? You're only going to be putting together outfits. So even if you want things to go in the same outfit, you don't have to pick like only gray as a neutral. For instance, I use gray, off-white, taupe, navy, and now I've been adding more brown, like chocolate brown versus taupe, but like a bitter chocolate. Anyway, and since all of those neutrals work with all of the colors I want, then they still all mix and match. I'm not sure if I am making sense or not. Or let's say, for my rule when I was rebuilding my wardrobe, once I realized I needed to be wearing muted, cool colors, I think I was around 25, so that's maybe 6 years ago, was I would get bottoms in neutrals, so skirts and trousers, and then that meant I could get blouses in any color that flattered me, because they would go with the skirts. And so if you're a knitter, you're probably knitting more sweaters and cowls and accessories than you are skirts and trousers. So if you're a knitter who wants a versatile wardrobe and wants her hand knits to go with everything, but you don't want to knit in neutrals, you don't have to. Just make sure that you have neutrals in other pieces to wear with your hand knits. Or just make sure that all of your colors come from the same palette, and then they really do go together. So like I can wear a blush pink cowl with a teal cardigan, and at least in my opinion, it looks good. You don't have to stick with neutrals. I happen to like wearing neutrals as well as colors, so that's why I have been knitting neutral cardigans lately. But so if you want to, so I suppose what I'm saying, I should have outlined this, I'm sorry, I have so many feelings about all this, is that if you want to make sure that your colors are going to go together and that you're going to get maximum wear out of a knitted object. However, you don't want to knit in a neutral or knit in neutrals regularly, then just choosing one of the seasonal color palettes is going to let you knit with all the colors in that palette. And I promise in that season, each season has a beautiful range of colors, and they will still all mix together in ways that are pleasing and easy, and so you don't have to plan your closet as much. Sorry, you don't have to plan your daily outfits as much because you have planned your closet. I should definitely write notes before I talk about wardrobe building again, shouldn't I? It's a topic I'm very interested in, which is why I talked about it in one of my early podcast episodes. Because I really enjoy personal style and that kind of thing. Like learning about it and reading about it and making a closet that works for me. Although I will never be a minimalist because I like being able to wear all kinds of colors and textures and shapes. Well, colors and textures. So I hope I gave you something to think about. And now we will do a quick review of Quince & Company Owl, and I will let you go. Quince & Company Owl is made in the United States from U.S. wool, 50%, and 50% alpaca. And I believe that some of the alpaca is from the U.S., but most of it is from New Zealand. Because they tried doing just U.S. alpaca, and they couldn't get a consistent quality from the industry. I think that's what Pam Allen said in one of the Knit FM episodes. It's a worsted weight woolen spun yarn, and it's about $10, I think, for a 50-gram skein, so it's on the expensive side. And I have used it to knit mittens and a hat, and then it's the charcoal gray color on these mittens, too. The blue is Brooklyn Tweed Shelter. So as you can see, I would say these two yarns are quite similar as far as their behavior goes. They're both woolen spun, and they're a similar weight and density, so they work well together for color work. These are my Matryoshki mittens. Okay, so, and these are my Hair in the Moon mittens, and then this is a cabled hat. So you can see it works beautifully in color work, and then I really like it in cables too, even though this is a dark green, so you don't see the cables as much. And this is Hemlock. The light color is Elf, and the charcoal gray I overdyed. It's not a color that I bought from Quince & Company. I think this yarn makes really excellent mittens. They're very warm because it's worsted weight and alpaca and wool, and alpaca is an even warmer fiber than wool. And they're very light, so they don't inhibit your movement much. You still, well, your thumb, which to me is an ideal combination for mittens, especially for winter mittens here. I also think it makes really lovely hats because it's a woolen spun yarn, so it's quite lightweight, so your hat isn't going to fall down. So even though this is cabled, it's in no way heavy. Compared to the cabled hats that I did with worsted spun yarn, this one is quite lightweight. It's easy to stuff in a pocket, and it will stay on my head all day. And it doesn't really stretch out. This isn't a normal brim, though. This is a cabled brim. I don't know how it would behave in normal ribbing, because I have not done that. I have also used this to knit, actually, a hat and mitten set for my dad, and the hat was all ribbing, so I can ask him whether that hat stretches out or not. Over time. He'll probably look at me like I'm crazy, but maybe he'll have an answer. Okay, so as I said, I think it looks very lovely in textures and cables. I think it's excellent for color work. I would never wear this yarn in a garment because I find it scratchy. It's the only Quince & Company yarn that I've knit with, and I've knit with most of them, that I would describe as scratchy. I expected it to be much softer because I see people knitting sweaters out of it, and so I was a bit taken aback when it arrived. Once I washed and blocked it, it was softer than in the skein, but it's still nowhere near soft enough for me for a sweater. I mean, I wouldn't anyway because it's worsted weight, but if they suddenly offered this in fingering weight, I still wouldn't do a sweater. As I mentioned when I was talking about the canopy yarn, I also suspect that my skin, parts of it disapprove of alpaca, even though I can wear alpaca around my neck just fine. So, like I'm wearing this right now, and this is quite a long mitten. And right about here, start scratching, feeling scratchy. My arms are one of my more sensitive points. I would never use this yarn to knit for people who are wool sensitive because, as I said, it just has a bit of a scratchy feel to it. However, when I'm actually wearing the mittens, I wear the cuff over the sleeve. And obviously the hat, it doesn't matter how scratchy it is because it's not touching my skin. It's only touching hair. And I have worn these mittens so much, and they have worn beautifully. Here, let me get close to the camera. Okay, so my mittens get a lot of use. I hold my dog leash through them, and I'm like picking up pine cones and messing with my phone and all that kind of stuff. So this has seen heavy wear, but it looks completely pristine. Like the back, which doesn't see heavy wear, looks the same as the palm, which gets wear. So I really think this is an excellently durable yarn. It comes in beautiful heathered colors, a whole range of naturals, as well as dyed heathers. And then there's also owl tweed, which I use for my dad's, which has like kind of a tweedy look to it. I would definitely knit another hat and mitten set out of this. In fact, once I decided that I was going to review yarn for this yarn, I was looking to see what other colors, and I don't have any dark red mittens, which seems silly because I wear dark red quite frequently, and it would go with quite a few of my winter coats. So I might be getting some dark red yarn for I tend to knit one pair of colorwork mittens a winter for myself because Claire does a knit along in February, I think. So this year I might get some dark red owl. So as I said, even though it's on the pricier side, I think it's really worth it for mittens. And as long as I knit shorter mittens, I don't need a big cuff like this, but we can talk about that another day. I should be able to get mittens and a hat out of 2 50-gram skeins just because the wool and spun yarn tends to go a bit further. And I have small hands. So I think it's excellent for that purpose. However, I would not use it for neckwear or sweaters or anything like that. And obviously, you know, your mileage varies. A lot of people have knit sweaters on Ravelry that they're really happy with. So it really just depends on your skin tolerance and how much insulation you need. Because this is woolen spun, it's warmer than worsted spun would be, and it's 50% alpaca. So that is a lot of warmth in a very lightweight package, which to me makes it perfect for winter accessories, but I would not want an everyday sweater out of this yarn. That is my short and sweet owl review, and the sun is setting. I can see it starting to get lower and lower on that horizon outside the window, which the camera is right in front of. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I will let you know if I manage to get the sleeve seaming tutorial up or not, but there already is a side seam tutorial and a grafting tutorial up. Thank you so much for the comments. It was really encouraging and makes me want to record more tutorials to know that you guys actually find them useful and helpful. As always, you can find me as The Charm of It on Ravelry and Instagram. I love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment in the Ravelry group comments thread or here on YouTube or on Instagram. You know the drill. Now that all that remains is for me to disturb my sleeping pets so that we can all say goodbye. Thistle, come here. Poor moth. She got her rabies vaccine yesterday, and I'm still harassing her. Come on. I know. Thistle is stretching, so this is her head. Here we go. Oh, moth. Okay. So, from all three of us, some happier to see you than others. Goodbye, thank you for watching, and I hope that we see you again very soon. I know.